too well? Is it okay? Okay. I'm sorry? I'm not as loud as usual. What's that mean? I guess, Dane, you need to turn it up a hair more. Not as loud as you do. That's like saying I'm not as good looking as normal. I asked Delane if he would to say a prayer for our class.
Let's go to God in prayer. Our gracious God and Father in heaven, we thank you so much for tonight's rest and the start of a new day, Lord. And we're just so thankful that we put you first in our lives today. As we worship you in spirit and truth this day, Father, may we glorify your name. Father, may we all be edified and uplifted through our studies, our Bible study today, and our worship today, Father. Help us to be drawn closer to you, Father, things that you would have us to do. Father, we're just thankful to be engaged here with other Christians this day as we do worship you. So thankful for the strength that we find in each other, the help and encouragement. We're just so thankful, Father. Father, may there always be love and peace among us, Father, that we strive to do our very best to live peacefully with all men. Father, we do ask that you forgive us of our shortcomings, our sins that we have in our lives, Father. We know that we are weak creatures and we sin against you and we fall short, but Father, just continue to help us and bless us in a way we just have that strength to just continue every day to face the trials and tribulations that may come our way. Father, we just pray, dear God, that you be with Kevin as he leads us today in this Bible study. Pray that it's beneficial to all of us, enrich our lives, Father, spiritually. We pray for our young people as they all separated and went to their classes. We just pray for them that they might learn much as well, Father. We pray for all of our teachers who are actively engaged at this time, teaching the classes. We're so thankful for the good work that all do here. Father, we just ask you to be with us throughout this day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Anybody notice anything different?
You don't have on bright color shirt?
Close enough. I don't have on blue. Yes, I did get a haircut also. All three of them. And I sent Tara or I asked her, I said, please see if you can find me a blue shirt because I think they're all dirty. And she came back with a blue one that I hadn't worn for I don't know how long. And I put it on, and believe me, this is not an exaggeration. The entire DeSelem family could have gotten into that shirt. So it's like, why didn't somebody tell me I was that fat? If you would, open your Bibles up to 2 Kings 5. 2 Kings 5. This has to do with, with the healing of Naaman. I think it's a great lesson. If you've ever sat down, about a month ago, I was reading in the Old Testament, and I started to read this, and I thought there are a gazillion different storylines in this and things that can help all of us. And as the book of Ecclesiastes says, that which is has already been, and that which will be has already been. So if we go and see about the past and how things are handled, I think it's a good time for us to learn. So 2 Kings 5. Again, this is going to be the healing of Naaman. And I use a lot of times a New World Translation. Sometimes I use the English Standard. And I rarely ever use the King James. I know my mom's pointing to herself, like, understandeth thou what thou readeth? I can't. I always remember trying to grow up over here in the school and learn regular English, and then try to go to King James English. That was tough. For me it was. So that's why I tend to stay with something that's a little bit more modern. So I'm telling you that so you'll know when I read something that's a little bit different. Like the first verse, for instance, I love how, I believe it's the New King James and maybe the English Standard, how it ends the first verse. It tells all about Naaman, but then it says, but he was a leper. That's a great comparison. So we'll start out. What I want to do is read the entire story here of Naaman, and then we'll go back and see if we can pick out some things in there that can maybe make us all a little bit better Christians and a little bit better people. The king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army. because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. At this time, Aramean raiders had invaded, or Syrian raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, "I wish my master would go see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy." So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. "Go and visit the prophet." The king of Aram told him, "I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel." So Naaman started out carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, "With this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and said, "This man sends me a leper to heal. Am I God that I can give life and take it away? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent his message to him. "Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message: "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy." But Naaman became angry and stalked away. "I thought he would certainly come out to meet me," he said. "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, Havana, and Pharpar better than any of the rivers in Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, 'Go and wash and be cured.'" So Naaman went down to the river Jordan and dipped himself 7 times as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child's, and he was healed. Then Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of God. They stood before him, and Naaman said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept any gifts." And though Naaman urged him to take the gifts, Elisha refused. Then Naaman said, "All right, but please allow me to load 2 of my mules with earth from this place, and I will take it back home with me. From now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except the Lord. However, may the Lord pardon me in this one thing. When my master the king goes into the temple of the god Ramon to worship there and leans on my arm, may the Lord pardon me when I bow also." "Go in peace," Elisha said. So Naaman started home again. We go back to the first verse. What do we learn about Naaman? First thing, what's it tell us? Verse 1. Okay, he's commander of the army. And on top of that, he's a great commander of the army, a great man. Who gave him his victories? God. Okay, God gave him the victories. Remember that was at a time when Israel had done bad and they were being punished. And as God does, he uses different situations to help us, different situations to punish us. And we learn about Naaman there. He's a great, great man. And then if you have the English Standard or the New King James, what's it say at the end of that verse? But he was a leper. He was a leper. And what was leprosy? It's a horrible, horrible disease. A lot of biological terms, different things were called leprosy, but if it was the leprosy that we know of, that wasn't even curable, I think, until about the early 1980s. It was very, very bad. Our medical guy here just shook his head, yes. Very bad stuff, essentially a bacteria that rots your flesh away. But here he was, a great, great man, a great leader. What do we know about lepers? They were shunned. So here was a man who had done great things, who had accomplished great things in his life, And what couldn't he do? Couldn't socialize with people much. What does it say in verse 2? Who was the young girl given to? The servant girl. His wife. Here he was married, a great man. Most likely couldn't hold his wife, kiss his wife, hug his wife because of this horrible disease. It's like the starving man at a buffet that he can't touch it. The sneeze guard goes all the way down where you can't get the food. But here was a great, great man, but yet the thing that he probably wanted the most, he couldn't get. How many of us have things like that in our lives? We do great things, but we're kind of blinded because I think we need to do a lot of comparisons to what the gospel is in our lives and how it can help us. We may have the greatest job, the greatest wife, the greatest children, and be as lost as somebody that's never become a Christian just because of our mindset. And sometimes we don't even know it. Pardon? Right. Couldn't heal himself at all. And probably every country that he's been in, he's tried. Because once you have that, I mean, that's pretty much a death sentence when you have leprosy. Now, what's some things that we can take from this book? Let's go to verse 2. Now, the Israelites had been taken captive, okay? And a young girl, a young woman, had been given to Naaman's wife. And it said, one day the girl said to her mistress, I wish my master would go and see the prophet in Samaria. Now, what's this tell us, for instance, about this young girl or this young lady? You got to kind of stand back and look at this maybe from a little wider perspective. What's that tell you about this particular young lady? Okay, she knew that there was somebody that could do this, and she had faith that this could be done. I'm sorry? Okay, now why? Now remember, she's a captive, okay? Okay, what kind of an attitude does she have? She's compassionate. Is she supposed to be? Now remember, she is a, quote, child of God. What kind of an attitude were they supposed to have? Did the command, love your neighbor, was that New Testament, Old Testament? What was it? Was she under that rule? Now you think if you were a captive and you had been taken away probably from your parents, would you have a good attitude about yourself? How many of us have it great and have a bad attitude? But think now, this young lady right here, no matter what Naaman and his wife were, what was she as a representative of God? She was a good servant because she said, you can be healed. Now what's this probably tell you about Naaman and his wife? Since she offered this. Okay, they were probably good people, wouldn't you guess? I mean, here they have a servant girl, and she evidently, and we can look at it one way or another, she's doing what she's supposed to, no matter whether they're good people or not. And are not we supposed to do that as Christians? How people treat us? You know, if I treat Jamie Hall like dirt, yep, that's one for you. Thank you, princess. And it's vice versa also. She treats me like dirt, but we get along that way. But if I treat her bad, what is her duty as a Christian to be? Try to be nice. And I know from Jamie's perspective, that's probably very difficult to do, to be nice to me. But that's what we're all supposed to do. No matter how we're treated, we're still supposed to do the right thing. And this young lady here was doing the right thing. Somebody had to teach her that. And she was receptive to it too. She could have just said, no, I don't believe in that. But she's had a good conscience about her. And then she most likely was treated, how do you think she was treated by Naaman and his wife? Just based on this story. I'd say she was treated pretty well, wouldn't you? Because she wants to help. I mean, here are the people that took over her country, took her away, and she's helping them. So they may have They may have sat down and discussed this. Who knows? We're not told that. But I think that's some of the great parts of this story is that we can sit and look at things and see, you know what? Maybe there's something to this. Because, we're told in the New Testament to go back to the Old. And why are we told that we can do that? Why? It's a great teacher. It tells us, the New Testament doesn't tell us situational things like this. But the Old is loaded with things like this that we can find answers of how to behave, how to conduct ourselves. So most likely here you've got Naaman, who was a great man, a mighty warrior, essentially a general in the army, has a death sentence on him, and most likely he and his wife still treated this poor young woman very well. And she said, I wish my master would go see the prophet in Samaria, and he would heal him of his leprosy. Now let's go to verse 4. And hey, anything you want to add, just speak up, raise your hand, whatever. Oh yeah, Syria is not the vacation spot of the world. Not anymore. I don't know if it ever was, but wow. Yeah, it's awful. And this is completely, I digress as I always do, but I did see something the other day. A lot of times you see in the media that we're told that the only reasons that the Muslims hate non-Muslims, essentially, especially Christians, is just the way we have our society. And that's all we're told. We just need to let it go. Well, they actually published something from a Muslim group. I can't remember all the details, I'm sorry. But it listed, I think it was 6 different reasons that they actually do hate us. And it was them that wrote it. And you know why? You know what number 1 was? Because we're Christians. They hate us. They say we mock God because we say that God had a son named Jesus. And they hate us for that. So you can't win against that. Now throw that in at no charge. You had no rights. Yeah, you had sacrificed your rights there. It's like being a prisoner. Okay, let's go to verse 4. How many of us have ever made mistakes? All right, how many guys are married? Come on. How many of us make mistakes? All of us do. And how many will make mistakes? All of us. Just ask my wife. I will make mistakes, right? I do. We all do. And you get disappointed in people. And I can tell these 2 new Christians right here, you know what? You guys will have a time that you get disgusted with fellow Christians and church and all that. You know why? Because there's people in it. And I'm telling you that just because you need to be strong. That's when you have to ignore. I can't remember the verse. I think it's in Ecclesiastes, but it says just pretty much pay attention to about half of what people say about you. And even then, because it says you'll even hear your own servant badmouth you. So it's best just to ignore things like that and be strong. In verse 4, I don't know if I'm going to get through any of this. Verse 4, what did they mess up already? So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said, go and visit the prophet. Who's he send the letter to? The king. Why? Okay, somebody's already made the mistake right there that the king is the most important person. And do you know who the king of Israel was at this time? Is it Joram, I believe? Yeah, Joram. And he's one of those kings, have you ever read about, that says that he did good in the sight of the Lord, he did evil in the sight of the Lord? He was one of the bad guys, okay? So Naaman started out carrying 750 pounds of silver and 150 pounds of gold. How many of you would retire if you had 150 pounds of gold? I thought you would. What's that? Well, bury it in your yard? Yeah, okay. Another parable there, Chris. Thank you. You know how much that was in gold in today's value? $3.6 million in gold. So that would have been a good caravan to hijack on the way in. And it was $200,000 and some in silver. I'd probably have been, why you bring silver? It's gold. Okay? But that is how much money he was willing to. What's that say about the king? and his appreciation for Naaman. He thought a lot of him, didn't he? He sent almost $4 million along with it. That's how important Naaman was to this king. I don't figure this was Naaman's bringing the money. This was the king. Now, when you go on to verse 7, it was kind of funny. Right at the end of verse 6, with this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy. And what's the king of Israel do when he reads the letter? Okay, there you go. There's another one. He tears his clothes. See, my mom used an Old Testament there. He rent his clothes. We think he's paying a monthly fee for his clothes, renting his clothes. But it says he tore his clothes. Why would he tear his clothing? Yeah. And the king's saying, am I God? Now what's here again? Now we know this guy is the king of Israel, right? He's the king of Israel. I'm sorry? Okay, tell me what I'm thinking. No. Now, if I'm not going there, you can go right ahead. Okay, but here's the king of Israel, and he's tearing his clothes. Why would he tear his clothes? I mean, think of it. Why would he be that angry? No, he's saying, this guy's tricking me. I can't know. But now here is a king of Israel. What was Israel known for? Following God, right? Now, what's he say about God? Rodney said it. Yeah, am I God? Now, how many of us, now, is not the king here recognizing that there is God? He's recognizing that the only person that's capable, the only being that's capable of doing this is who? God. He acknowledges it, but then how is it, if you look in Chronicles and Kings, how does it say that he lived? I told you a few minutes ago. He knew of God, but he didn't serve him. Not at all. He recognized what God could do. How many of us do that? How many of your friends and neighbors know that there is God, but then they don't do anything else? And there's lots of different places that you can go in this book, a lot of different storylines. But here is the king. Now, was the king of Israel and Elisha good friends? You know that. Were they good friends, guys? No. Why? Okay, the king wasn't living right. So Elisha was pretty much up his nose on God's side, telling him to straighten himself up. Now, what should the king have done when he got that letter? What should he have done? If I knew that I can't heal him, but Chris can, what do? Pass it right to Chris. And then the guy will probably come back a couple hours later and say, why'd you do that? But he didn't do that. He wasn't gone. If you notice in the next verse then, it says, but when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him. Why are you so upset? Now this is probably another one right up the old king's nose. Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is what? What's it say? A prophet? What's it say? Close. Is there another word in your version that describes prophet? Okay, in this one, it says he will learn that there is a true prophet in Israel. Were there false prophets? How about in our lives? There are false teachers? I was telling Dane before class this morning that I was down around Ellenboro and Pennsboro the other day, and I went by a denominational church building with a sign, and it said right in the bottom, in the manufactured part of the sign, we teach only from the authorized version of the King James Bible, which is kind of funny because I think there's 4 authorized versions of the King James Bible. So which one are they using? Don't know. Yep.
Back in
Okay.
It says Naaman also took 10 changes of clothes.
Okay.
Does that show a lack of faith, or does it just say that he doesn't know how long it's going to take, so I better take extra
Okay.
clothes?
Okay. Now, what version are you reading?
I'm reading
New King James? Okay. From what I've been able to read, this was gifts for the king. So this was 10 sets of what they call kingly clothing, which would probably have been something, high dollar, maybe purple, that kind of stuff. That's what it was. Okay. I know some of this stuff is not clear. It really isn't. You read it, it's like 10 pairs of clothes, especially if he's riding through the desert a lot of time. Yeah, I understand exactly. That's a good question. But that's what it was.
He said his stuff didn't tear easily.
It didn't tear easily? Nah. Boy, what's the old million comedians out of work? Yeah. Yeah. This was not rent. It was rent to own. Okay, how's that? All right. Any other off-color comments on that? Okay. So he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel. Okay, now Naaman, it's hard to tell, and it's kind of funny if you go online and type some of this stuff in, and type in Naaman, and it'll show like this one guy with one chariot and one horse and maybe 2 other people. They think when this guy traveled, he perhaps had 50 to 100 of his lieutenants with him. And there was more than one chariot, a lot of horses. So this was a formidable force, especially when you got almost $4 million in precious metal along with you. You're going to have some bad dudes with you to protect that. Okay, so when it says Naaman in verse 9 went with his horses and chariots, it was a procession. It was something that the people in the countryside saw, and they respected it. Now, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Kingdom of Israel. Like, that's who Naaman's representing.
Yep.
That's why the king's upset. Like,
He knows it's coming.
Yeah. Is this what's happening? I mean, he's seeing all these people. What kind of a fight is he picking? I mean, these people they would kill you on the battlefield and drink your blood. They would skin you alive on the battlefield. The Assyrians were mean
Yes.
people.
Yes, they
And
were.
now, I got to cure this guy. You know? And so now he's going to Elisha's
Yeah.
house. You know?
Yeah.
Kind of thing, with all these people. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. It sure is. Yeah, we kind of think of it, and like I said, you look and maybe try to find some artwork for a kid's class, and it shows one guy in a chariot. It's like, no, it was not like that. This was something big. Now, here we come in, verse 9, some more predisposed thinking of how we do things. Okay, what do you think Naaman had in mind? It tells us down in here. What do you think he had in mind of being healed? What's going to happen?
There's gonna be some big elaborate production.
Oh, yeah. He thinks it's going to be elaborate. He's going to come out and do the abracadabra or maybe touch his skin. He has all kinds of things going on in his head. And if you go down in verse 11, it says, but Naaman became angry. And this doesn't mean he was upset. This means, as Chris said, he was Syrian angry, okay? He was mad. He was enraged. And if you look at what it says, the first 2 words that he says, at least in this interpretation, was, I thought. You go on down where it continues, it says, I expected. How does that compare to us when we think about God? How about when we want to become a Christian? Who do we follow? What do we expect? We have grand expectations, I think, sometimes because you'll see something on TV, maybe the TV evangelist. So then you have that sort of predisposed thought in your mind of, well, in order for me to become a Christian, it's got to be this or this or this. What do we learn here about Naaman? He said, well, I thought, what was he told? Nothing fancy happened. Elisha didn't even come out and meet him. But what was he told? Okay? And he was enraged because he was told that. Now, what are we learning something about Naaman here? Now, if he was a general in the army, is he used to receiving orders or giving orders? Sure, he's used to giving orders. Yeah, it's yeah, and all these people watching probably from the countryside, even though it doesn't say that. But like I said, this caravan is not going to slip in unseen. That struck the fear of God in people. And here he thought it was going to be something great, and it wasn't. And we learn a huge lesson. That's one of the reasons I wanted to touch on all this, is when we have our ideas, our prejudices, our thoughts, what do we need to do about that? I'm sorry? Check it against the Bible. Are we supposed to be humble as Christians? What's humility mean? Okay? But how many of us sometimes get a little arrogant as Christians? How many of us get arrogant as non-Christians? We're told not to. And here, this is a great way here, I think, when Naaman became angry and stalked away. Now, he was one mad guy, okay? Here he thought all this was going to happen, and now nothing. Nothing at all. Elisha didn't even come out. Who did he send? A servant, just a servant. It's like, now, do you think he did that, or was God behind that? Of course God was behind that. God told him, send your servant out. And he did. And what did Naaman do? He was mad. Now, when we go into verse 13, remember here, where are they headed now? They're going back. They're headed back. And most likely, I picture this in my mind. Have any of you guys ever been mad before? I have a few times. But what do you do when you're mad? Do you see everything, or you get kind of focused? I'm mad, and I'm out of here. Couldn't you see him leading that whole entourage of people out? And they're trying to catch up to him? Well, what's this also now tell us about Naaman in verse 13? But his officers tried to reason with him and said, Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, go and wash and be cured. Now, what did Naaman do then? Did he keep on going, or did he stop? Okay, he stopped. What's that tell you about Naaman with his interaction with his men? Okay, he allowed them to talk to him. So that tells you a little bit more about Naaman, that he listened to the people that were under him because they were able to reason with him. And evidently, they were used to taking his orders. They were probably saying, hey, you've told us to do some crazy things at some point. Something simple, we'll do that in a heartbeat. And they convinced him, look, we know you can do great things. How many of us like to do great things and be rewarded and told we've done a good job and blah, blah, blah? All of us do. We all do. But what about something simple? Yeah, because it would have been off with his head. Yeah, one too many lip-offs and you're dead. They didn't demote you much back then. They pretty much killed you. So then he went down into the river, dipped 7 times as the man of God had instructed him. And what happened? Okay. He's cured of his leprosy. Now, look at that in comparison to baptism. What does Jesus ask us to do to become a Christian? Is it some great thing? Yeah, good point. We only have to dip 1 time.
What it tells us is that there's no substitution for God's plan.
No, in all of this.
So there's baptism, where faith only is not mentioned, sprinkling is not mentioned, and pouring is not mentioned. There's only one thing that God requires.
Yep.
And I like what Brother Dell, we were talking, I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
Because God himself adds them to the church.
Yep.
I mean, that's the miracle right there.
Yeah. Our sins are forgiven.
Right.
But yeah, how many times though do we listen to people when they tell us you have to do this, 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 this to become a Christian? And as I've told you guys a bunch of times, they think there's what, around 30 to 35,000 different denominations of Christianity in this world? And we're told,
I think theirs is the right one.
and they'll be completely opposite. And both say that their way is the right way.
Some of those denominations
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of incredible where they come from. But like Randy said up there, if you don't go by here and trust it and obey it, you can do anything you want to. In this book, and Tara and I got this one, I think for Cameron, no, it's Preston. Preston K. Wilson from Love, Mom and Dad, Christmas 2009. You can read right in here how to become a Christian. And if you're reading the forward, I found this out about a year ago. Don't know why. When you're reading this is through the Mossy Oak brand camouflage. I'm trying to find the manufacturer here. But it tells you, it has a little forward in here. It tells you about hunting and how close it'll get you to God. And then it says, if you want to become a Christian right now, just believe. You don't even have to use the book. It tells you, yeah, they just kind of like they should have just sold you that much right there. But instead, that the whole thing, how to become a Christian, is right here. And they tell you how right there. And it's just believe. Jesus will come into your heart, and then you can go hunting on Sunday mornings. Yeah. But how many times do we have, that's why I thought Naaman was a great example, or how many times do we have our own thoughts on how God should be this and how this, and I want to be this, and it's all us. Yeah, that's the whole story of this. God can't be bought, even though Naaman brought millions of dollars. He can't change his mind because you want him to. And finally, what did Naaman do? He had to change. He had to humble himself. And if you're humble, then what do you do? There you go. Thank you, Sunshine.
Yeah, one thing I think, here, I like out of all this, is that how it all started, how all of this all transpired, because of that little maid servant with the news. She wasn't afraid to share it with others. She told them that, and look what all happened from that. How often sometimes do we have chances and the opportunities to tell someone about God, and we don't share
And
it?
we don't. Yeah, and we're told to what
What may happen, what may transpire from those things we do share.
yeah, we're told we watch the clouds and see, they're eventually going to drop rain, and if a tree falls in the north or south, it lays there. And the object of that whole story was, you can't judge when things are going to happen. So we're supposed to plant our seed, like you said, all the time.
It wasn't nothing great elaborate she had to do. She just had to share, about God.
Hey, it got his attention, didn't it?
That's right.
But how many of us know that we have leprosy? Yeah. We're dying. If we're not a Christian, we have leprosy, and we're dying. And we're dead. We're a dead man walking, dead woman walking. But how many of us will acknowledge that we have leprosy? I don't have it. We're all Naamans when it comes to that. And it can be a lot of different things. I can believe that I'm a great-looking guy with a big head of hair. Doesn't make it so, You have to be realists in that. Like I said a minute ago, we have to be humble. I always told Preston and Cameron growing up, be proud of your humbleness. That's a joke. Come on, you can't do that. But we have to be humble. We have to be humble. And then if we're humble, we won't argue about what this book says because you can see what it says. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. Are you going to listen to it or not? Any questions or anything? Yes, Mark.
One thing that we always assume is the faith that sent him down to Jim 7 times. He may not have been faithful at all. He may
We don't know at all.
When he came up out of that water, that he believed in God and was extremely faithful at that time, to the point that he honored God. And he did not do that at the beginning.
What's that say about our faith, though, Mark, as we grow?
Our
Do you ever have...
Our faith is not a blind faith, just
No.
like his. It is proven time.
Yeah, now his faith in the beginning, do you think he had doubts when he was told that? That's like the first time maybe when we hear about being a Christian. Because we've been told by our friends and neighbors that, oh, that's a bunch of garbage. You don't believe in that. Evolution, the Earth's 5 billion years old, on and on and on. And that is in our minds. But then we start to hear about it. Then we start to think about it and gain a little knowledge and gain a little faith. Really, doubt is insufficient faith. You still have some faith. It's just not all what you need. It's sort of like when Peter got out of the boat and walked toward Jesus. He had a lot of faith initially, and then it became insufficient as he walked. But yeah, it's a good point. That's the same way with us.
Yeah, when you have those doubts, do we just regress them, or do we pursue them?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I taught in the teen class last week. You need to come out with those because there's somebody that has the answer. Maybe it wasn't me, maybe it was you, it might be Chris, but you need to pursue those doubts until you get the right answer.
Yeah, and you'll get that fixed at some point. You'll get it figured. I had a guy sent me a text yesterday. He's just been a Christian for a couple years, and I don't know if he's smart enough to come up with this on his own, but he said, I found that faith is not a microwave oven, it's more of a crock pot. And I thought, that's pretty good. That is. Yeah, Chris.
Two, with talking about faith, you know, I think when we approach situations with people, the Bible, doesn't matter what the topic is, I think you have to approach the situation with the idea that there is always a chance I might be wrong. I don't care what the topic's on.
Oh, sure.
Maybe this person has some bit of information I've never thought about before. Because until you're willing to do that, you're not really going to learn anything from the situation regardless.
Right.
Because you already have what's right in your head. You know what I mean? And so I think it's interesting, like in all of this chapter, the only people that talk to Naaman that actually have important things to say are servants.
Mm-hmm.
The king didn't have anything to say. Well, thanks, we're picking a fight. And then just sends him on his way.
Yeah.
The only people that gives him any valuable information are the servants. And again, he's a big dude.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an important guy. And he only listens to the first one and the last one. The Elisha's servant he doesn't listen to.
Mm-mm.
But honestly, at the end of the day, dude, if the very first one had been inspired by God, she could have told him what to do.
Yeah.
But it was a progression.
You still have to obey.
Mm-hmm.
Still have to obey. Anything else? I got about 3 more hours of stuff, but all right, thank you guys.